If you have had the pleasure of reading my book, then you know I believe that people who are interested in changing our society for the better, they have to identify their radical revolutionary contribution to that work. And when I say that, I am not talking about protesting. Although for some, that may be their radical revolutionary contribution. For someone else, it might be corporate sustainability or teaching young people how to organize. Every weekend, I have the privilege of bringing you the news about what is happening across our country, as well as social and political commentary on some of the most pressing issues of our time. My radical revolutionary contribution is speaking truth to power on this network while keeping the bar high and substantive. And it's something I've been actually thinking a lot about since this past Thursday night when my boss, MSNBC president, Rashida Jones, was honored by the Radio, Television, Digital News Association in accepting the organization's First Amendment Award. And she had this to say. She said, quote, "Historians will note we as a nation have had a rich and colorful legacy of vivid, provocative, and sometimes irresponsible commentary since the First Amendment was ratified. But with the bad has also come so much more good. The First Amendment has enabled our history's most powerful and effective commentary to flourish. Spirited commentary, lively debate, informed discussions. They're as critical to a democracy as the ballot box itself." And speaking of informed discussions, my political panel joins me now. Eugene Scott is a senior politics reporter for Axios. Cristobal Alex is an MSNBC political analyst and former president of the Latino Victory Project. And Jennifer Horn is with us virtually, and she is the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party. Welcome to you all. You know, Eugene, in another life, you wrote a very interesting race and politics column. So Rashida also had something else to say in her remarks I want to get your thoughts on. She noted how the commentary that protected the First Amendment was critical to the voices of icons like W.E.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells and Maya Angelou, specifically to call out injustice and inequality. Can you expand on that point?
Yeah, so as you noted, I used to cover identity politics, and we all know that your identity shapes your politics and how politics and policy can affect you. But a lot of people don't understand how people in this country have different experiences and how policy and politics impact them differently. And it's really important for the press, for the media to talk about how lawmaking can affect women and millennials and people of color and immigrants and elderly people differently. And so the press has a responsibility, be it hosting a network or writing a column or even a podcast, to make that clear to voters.
What effect do you think that social media has had on our social and political commentary?
At its best, it's gotten voices into the conversation that would not be able to be published in the Washington Post or be on MSNBC. At worst, disinformation has just been out of control, and there's a lot of harmful commentary that's not really nuanced or thoughtful that gets, too much coverage and too much attention.
I think that there's also a responsibility factor here, too. Jennifer, we barely saw 2 years ago during the insurrection just how dangerous lies and conspiracies masking as commentary can be. And I mean, just barely, just a little bit. So right. I'm being facetious. Obviously, we saw it a lot. So how should folks within the media apparatus be navigating that commentary?
Well, I think it's really important to make the distinction between commentary and information, or commentary and news, commentary and fact. It's one thing for there to be an energetic exchange of ideas and commentary, an exchange of opinions, an exchange of perspective. It's another thing altogether to advance false information as fact, as data, and that's what we saw happen on January 6th. Leading up to the insurrection, we had a single news organization. I hope it's okay for me to say it, that it was Fox News. As we all know now, it's been widely reported that they knew they were giving people information and presenting it as truth when they knew, as they said it, that it was false. So that's a whole different story than commentary and engaging exchange of opinions and perspectives. That's actually dangerous.
You know, Cristobal, Jennifer makes an important point. Yeah, she's talking about that commentary, and it was on Fox News, but it was also on different conservative outlets, if you will, across the country. Now, Dominion, in a company that makes voting machines, is suing Fox News in a defamation lawsuit, right. And and there's particularly about this week we saw some text messages, right, over the last couple of weeks from Fox News hosts that made their way into a filing, right? Then there's this deposition of Rupert Murdoch himself, specifically talking about this. You've got Fox News, meanwhile, saying that the suit is actually a violation of the First Amendment, and the hosts were simply reporting on what a sitting president was saying about an election, not necessarily editorializing. What do you make of this?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you again. You know, here's the thing. Our democracy is under attack. We're on a precipice. And when you have a major news organization that millions and millions of people watch, spreading those lies, it's harmful to our democracy. And it's very rare for a defamation suit to actually work. When you're being sued for defamation, the absolute defense to a defamation claim is to show that you're telling the truth. And here, as you pointed out, what we have are text messages between Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, and others admitting that they were actually spreading lies for the purpose of increasing their news viewage. And so that is a huge problem for our democracy. And I think this $1.6 billion lawsuit is actually going to stick, and I hope will have some impact. And the irony is rich here, right? Because these are the same folks who would scream as loud as they could about fake news and fake media and the mainstream media, but it's actually them who are the ones who are spreading the lies. I
mean, I do think it is very dangerous for our discourse when just folks are not telling the truth. It's a very interesting conversation. Before I let you guys go, I want to make sure I want to turn and talk about the student loan situation happening, particularly this week in the Supreme Court. They just heard arguments challenging President Biden's executive order wiping out student loan debt of up to $20,000 for individual borrowers if they have Pell Grants. The Justice Department is arguing that the HEROES Act of 2003 authorizes this broad student debt forgiveness plan. Now, the Justice Department says that the legislation gives the Education Department the power to waive student debt in response to a national emergency. Critics say that that is a stretch. I think there are some conservative justices that seem skeptical here. The idea seemed pretty straightforward, though, to Justice Elena Kagan. Take a listen to this.
Congress could not have made this much more clear. I mean, Congress didn't say exactly the circumstances in which it wanted the Secretary to use this authority. Of course not. This is a bill about, like, what happens when you have an emergency. So what Congress said is what happens when you have an emergency is the Secretary has the power to take care of emergencies. And it has that power by way of waiving or modifying any provision and adding others in lieu of them.
Now, Jennifer, do you think that there's any chance that the court doesn't rule along party lines here?
I'd be surprised. I hate to say that about the Supreme Court of the United States. I'd be surprised if they didn't, especially after what we saw, coming from in the way of their questions. Their questioning, I think, was on Tuesday. But I'll say very quickly, regardless of how this particular case turns out at the Supreme Court, whether or not they decide that the executive branch does or doesn't have this authority, what concerns me the most is that whether you forgive the loan or not, this particular definition of the loan or not, we still are going to have the same problem. There are still going to be students who are subject to predatory lending. There's still going to be universities that are upping their tuition outrageously.
Or Jennifer, frankly, people who cannot afford. I mean, we're about to be out of time, but Cristobal, I'll give you the last word on this. You were at the White House during this time. What say you about this whole situation? You know,
I'll tell you, I think President Biden and Secretary Cardona were exactly right. Student loan debt is out of control. And what this would do...
But what if the Supreme Court doesn't go along? What happens?
We still need to do something because the 45 million who are struggling under the weight of this debt need to forget about worrying about their past and think about their future. Take that resource, buy a house, invest in a business, build our economy. And for political reasons, I think Republicans are going to pay the price. Groups like we, the 45 million and others, aren't going to let them forget if they block this path.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Eugene Scott, Cristobal Alex, and Jennifer Horn, I appreciate you all very, very much.